The man who owned the sky. In a city where ambition wore mirrors for skin, Armin Hale, 38, lived above the weather. His office crowned the 46th floor of Hale Systems, a platform that synchronized hospitals, hotels, and the pulse of a restless market. From up here, the skyline looked obedient. Even storms remembered their manners. He had all the trophies that make magazines glow. Investor of the Year, Global Visionary, Philanthropy Laureate. They lined a wall like a quiet jury that always found him innocent. His calendar bled color. His life did not. He smiled in photographs with a precision that could cut marble, then went home to rooms curated by people who called emptiness minimalism. Narration. Power made him fluent in numbers and mute in everything else. There was an ache he kept misplacing, the soft, unreasonable truth that success had never once held his hand. He ignored it, the way you ignore a door that might open to something you can't control. On a rain-bright evening, something slipped through his defenses. Not a hostile bid, not a lawsuit, but a note stretched on a bow. For reasons he didn't bother to justify, Armin left without the driver. The tower doors parted, releasing him into the city's wet breath. At the corner by a shuttered bookstore, a woman played violin, eyes closed, brow furrowed, the way people look when they ask a question only music can answer. Noor Elahi, 27, a plain gray coat, damp hair, escaping a loose tie, fingers flushed from cold. The bow in her hand stitched warmth through the night. A few pedestrians paused, then pretended not to feel human. The sound threaded through the rain, and for a moment, the city remembered it had a heart. Armin stopped. The ache inside him leaned forward, and for the first time all year, listened. He placed a folded bill in the open case, the reflex of a man trained to place money between himself and discomfort. Noor nodded, without performance, and kept playing. The last note trembled, then settled into the rain, like a leaf choosing where to sink. "Thank you," she said, without looking up. "I didn't do anything," he replied, unrehearsed. "You stopped," she murmured. "That's not nothing." Her voice wasn't impressed. It was kind. It rattled him more than headlines ever could. He walked away, the melody following like a stray cat that had already chosen him. He told himself he'd forget her by morning. The melody disagreed. And the morning arrived with Trouble dressed in a navy suit. Rivaltech, his younger, louder competitor, filed an injunction claiming Hale Systems' new medical scheduling engine used their proprietary sequence. Legal called it baseless. Investors called it risk. And risk makes money nervous. Armin orchestrated the response like a symphony of control. Double PR spend, careful statements, friendly anchors, an emergency stand-up where everyone said, "We've got this." Through tight throats. He even bought a startup before lunch, the old reflex, when threatened, acquire. That night, work lost its taste. He drifted back to the corner by the bookstore. Noor wasn't there. Only a damp flyer clung to a lamppost. Community clinic, Saturday. Volunteers needed. In a slanted hand, free music time for kids at 4 p.m. Noor. He arrived that Saturday with nothing to donate but the one thing she'd asked for: time. The clinic's paint flaked, but hope did not. Noor guided small hands through scratchy scales, laughing at wrong notes as if they were doors to something better. When the lesson ended, she poured tea from a dented kettle into paper cups that bent at the lip. "I don't usually have tea," he admitted. "Neither do we," she smiled. "But today we do." He left with a warm paper cup, a colder phone, and the awareness that he had been seen. The kind of seeing money can't survive unchanged. His empire was cracking. He just didn't hear it over the sound of her violin. Rivaltech leaked anonymous emails. Headlines sprouted like weeds. Was Hale Systems cutting corners? The board scheduled an alignment call. How rich people say intervention. His CFO, Victor Dane, offered options that tasted like apology and sounded like strategy. At the clinic, a nurse banged a flickering TV until a talk show stabilized around Armin's face. "Isn't this your boss?" someone asked Noor. She hesitated. She didn't know. He hadn't told her, and she hadn't asked. She remembered his hands shaking slightly when he tied a child's shoelace. People with power rarely tremble in public, unless they're learning to feel again. That night he texted, "Saturday, will you be there again?" She replied, "Yes. Don't bring donations, bring time." The simplest instruction felt like a door he'd never noticed before. He wanted to step through without checking what he might leave behind. At dawn, legal called with voices wearing gloves. "We found something in the commit logs," they said. "You need to come in." In the glass-walled war room, screens glowed like a city at night. Thousands of windows, some dark, some plotting light. Legal pointed to timestamps that predated research logs. "Impossible unless someone seeded the trail," counsel said. A pause. The credentials belonged to Victor. Victor, the ally from before Hale Systems was even an idea. Loyalty rarely leaves fingerprints, but betrayal always does. "Why would he sabotage us?" Armin asked. "Maybe he didn't," Legal replied gently. "Maybe someone borrowed his hands. Or maybe Rival Tech offered him a softer landing." The room felt colder than rain. For a moment, Armin saw himself the way his enemies did. A man built so high he wouldn't know the ground until it vanished beneath him. His phone buzzed with a reminder he'd refused to cancel. Clinic, 4 p.m. He went anyway. He arrived empty-handed and unarmored. Noor handed him a box of colored pencils and nodded toward a hand-painted sign. "Draw what you're afraid of. Then draw what helps." He sat beside a boy who drew a hospital bed. The second drawing showed a kite. "Why a kite?" Armin asked softly. "It goes up when it's windy," the boy said. "Wind is scary, but the kite likes it." Something inside Armin settled, a room finding its shape after years of being staged for strangers. Noor watched him the way she watched everything, gently, as if patience were a language. His phone buzzed again, a message from Victor. "Need to talk. Alone." Noor saw the shadow cross his face. "Go," she said softly. "Just don't forget where you came back to." He nodded, pocketing a truth that wasn't for sale. Being needed feels different when the need isn't for your money. The parking garage smelled of rain and regret. Victor Dane, Armin's oldest ally, waited beside a car that gleamed like gilt under fluorescent light. His collar was undone, his confidence gone. Armin's voice cut through the silence. "Tell me it isn't you." Victor's lips trembled. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." He held up a flash drive. "They wanted noise, Armin. Just noise, enough to rattle investors. Rival Tech offered me a way out. My daughter's treatment. She's sick. They promised her a chance if I helped them." For a heartbeat, the world froze. No hum, no thunder. Only the weight of betrayal between two men who had once built an empire on trust. Armin stared at the drive, then at Victor. "You sold everything we built." Victor looked away. "No, I sold you, because you stopped seeing people. You only saw performance reports." The words cut deeper than the scandal itself. Armin thought of Noor, her laughter in broken hallways, her quiet insistence that kindness wasn't a weakness. He realized, in that moment, he'd built a kingdom where loyalty suffocated under numbers. Victor extended the flash drive with shaking hands. "This will clear your name, but it'll destroy mine." Armin's voice broke quietly. "Then I'll carry both our names." Mini cliffhanger beat. Above them, a red light blinked on a security camera. Someone else was already watching. The next morning broke like a storm. Breaking news. CEO of Hale Systems linked to insider scandal. Someone had leaked the footage. Armin and Victor in the garage, edited to look like a secret deal. His silence in the clip became guilt in every headline. Within an hour, his life turned into a public debate. Investors froze contracts. Employees whispered. The stock collapsed like gravity had just remembered his name. Armin sat at his desk, staring out at the skyline that once bowed to him. Now, it watched him fall. A single message from Noor blinked on his phone. "If the world is breaking around you, come help fix the small part we still can." For the first time, those words felt like air after drowning. He closed his laptop, ignored 50 missed calls, and went back to the only place that still made him feel human, the clinic. But as he stepped out, cameras turned, flashes igniting like lightning. The city had found its favorite story, a king stripped of his crown. Noor was there, kneeling beside a child wrestling with a violin bow. She didn't ask why Armin looked like a man who had run from a burning house. She simply smiled. He joined the children drawing again. One sketched a falling tower. Another drew hands catching it. Armin swallowed the lump in his throat. Noor whispered, "You can't build everything alone, you know." He smiled faintly. "Seems I never learned how to build with anyone else." They sat in quiet as the storm softened outside. He didn't tell her about the leaked footage or the bored silence. But for a moment, he remembered what peace sounded like, laughter echoing through chipped walls. When he left, Noor followed him into the rain. "You'll be fine," she said softly. "Not because you have money, but because you're learning what matters when it's gone." He turned to thank her, but a black sedan waited at the curb. The door opened. A familiar figure stepped out. Elliot Grant, CEO of Rivaltech. Elliot Grant was everything Armin despised in others, and everything he had once been himself. Charming, precise, untouchable. Elliot smirked, umbrella tilted against the storm. "Rough week, Armin? I told them you'd fall hard." Armin's jaw tightened. "You engineered this." Elliot shrugged, casual. "Business isn't about truth. It's about control. You can still win. Sign Hale Systems over to us. Let me clean up your mess. You'll walk away rich, untarnished." For a single heartbeat, his old instincts whispered temptation, the comfort of escape, the familiarity of deals. But Noor's words echoed louder. "Not because you have money, but because you're learning what matters." He stepped closer. "You're right about one thing," Armin said evenly. "It's about control, and today I'm taking mine back." Elliot's smirk didn't flinch. "Pride won't feed you when you're finished." Armin's eyes were calm. Neither did money. He turned and walked away, rain soaking his immaculate suit, his armor dissolving, thread by thread. Inside the car, a voice crackled over speakerphone. "Will he play ball?" Elliot smirked. "He will. Everyone breaks eventually." Armin didn't hear the words, but the storm did, and it refused to stop raining. By Monday, the storm had a face, his. The boardroom was colder than the rain outside. Investors sat like judges, their eyes sharp with fear and self-preservation. The chairman's voice was level. "We'll protect the company's image. Effective immediately, you're relieved as CEO, pending inquiry." Armin didn't argue. He simply stood, buttoned his jacket, and placed a folded envelope on the table. His resignation letter, written days earlier. Noor had inspired every word of it. He looked around one last time, not at the skyline models or the glass walls, but at the people who had forgotten how to dream without numbers. He exhaled once, not in defeat, but in release. The morning after his resignation, the world had already written his obituary. Headlines screamed in capital letters, "Billionaire falls from grace. Hale Systems in free fall." Reporters camped outside his apartment, like vultures guarding the bones of a legend. For the first time in years, Armin walked out without a plan. No statement, no press release, no spin. Just a man stripped of noise. He wandered through rain-slick streets, past his own billboards, past the logo that had once made strangers nod with respect. The faces around him didn't recognize him anymore. Maybe they never had. By afternoon, he found himself standing outside the community clinic, the place that used to smell like music and children's crayons. Now it was silent. He pushed the door open and found Noor packing boxes. Her violin leaned against the wall, untouched. Blended dialogue. "What happened?" he asked. Her voice broke, soft but steady. "Funding's gone. We were already behind on rent. The landlord gave notice. Armin's throat tightened. I can fix this. She looked up sharply. Don't you get it? You can't fix everything with money, Armin. The words hit harder than any headline. He wanted to argue, but the truth in her eyes ended the debate before it began. He realized he had lost not just his company, but the illusion that control was love. Noor kept packing, while Armin helped quietly, folding the children's drawings from the clinic walls, their fears and hopes crayoned in color. One read, I'm scared of hospitals. Another, I'm happy when the music plays. He placed them carefully into a folder like sacred documents. Noor turned. Why are you here, Armin? He paused. Because this place feels more real than anything I've ever owned. She smiled sadly. Then help me keep it alive, not as a savior, as a volunteer. He nodded, and for once, no part of him resisted humility. Days turned to weeks. Armin scrubbed floors, repaired windows, served tea, fixed old computers. People smiled at him now, not as a CEO, but as one of them. He saw the exhaustion behind Noor's kindness, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she played violin to chase fear more than melody. There was a sadness she never named. He wanted to ask, but he'd learned that sometimes the most respectful thing you can offer is silence. One evening, as he locked the clinic door, a voice behind him whispered, You think redemption is free, Armin? It was Elliot Grant. Elliot stood by his car, his expression a mix of victory and pity. You've fallen far, he said. But you're still a brand, Armin. I can make you useful again. Armin's jaw tightened. You've done enough damage. Elliot smirked. You're naive. Rivaltech doesn't destroy competitors. It consumes them. Sign over your patents, and I'll fund your precious clinic for life. The rain hissed between them like a warning. Armin studied him, his own past staring back, a man who thought generosity was just good marketing. He almost laughed. Keep your money, Armin said. You wouldn't know what to do with love if it showed up on your balance sheet. Elliot's smile sharpened. Then watch it all disappear. You'll crawl back eventually. He turned and left, tires slicing through puddles like punctuation marks at the end of an era. Armin stood long after the headlights faded, soaked, breath trembling. For the first time, he wasn't angry, just awake. That night, he opened his bank app and began transferring assets to anonymous charities, one of them under the name Noor Foundation. For a week, Armin vanished from the world's noise. He sold the penthouse, the cars, the art that once impressed people who never knew his name. He gave it all away quietly, every cent that had built his cage. He asked nothing in return. His last transaction wasn't a sale. It was a gift. He bought the clinic building anonymously and transferred ownership to Noor under a trust for the children's program. In the paperwork's final line, he wrote, Some places deserve to exist without being bought. When Noor found the folder with the deed tucked inside her violin case, her eyes filled instantly. She didn't need to ask who had done it. She just looked up and whispered, Thank you. Meanwhile, Armin watched the city from a small apartment window. No glass walls, no noise, no lies. For the first time, he felt rich in silence. Then the phone rang. A voice from the Securities Commission said, Mr. Hale, the evidence you submitted has been verified. Rivaltech's being charged. We'll need you to testify. He closed his eyes. The past was calling again. But this time, he wasn't afraid to answer. When Armin entered the hearing room, flashbulbs flared like lightning. Elliot sat across the table, his confidence thinning with every minute. Armin placed the flash drive before the panel. He spoke calmly, not as a man seeking revenge, but as someone telling the truth, because it was all he had left. Money hides many things, he said, but it can't hide what kind of person you are when no one's buying. The room fell silent. The chairwoman nodded. We'll proceed with charges. Thank you, Mr. Hale. He stepped outside into light drizzle. Freedom didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace. Armin's new apartment had 4 rooms and no echoes. The walls remembered other people's laughter. The floorboards kept secrets in their seams. He began to learn the shape of ordinary time, the kettle taking too long, the hum of a tired fridge, the neighbor who watered plants at the same hour each evening like a quiet prayer. He didn't answer reporters. He ignored investors. Every morning he walked to the clinic, the one he'd saved without asking to be thanked, and offered something he'd never put on a ledger: hours. He built shelves in a storage room that smelled of disinfectant and citrus. He coaxed the wheezing printer back from the break. He practiced listening without reaching for solutions. Some days, Noor watched from the doorway, violin case resting against her hip. She noticed the changes no headline could score. The way his shoulders lowered when he spoke to a frightened parent. The way he let silence breathe instead of filling it with certainty. The way he didn't flinch toward his phone when the world knocked. She saw the dignity in how unfinished he was. One afternoon, a girl in a plastic crown asked, "Are you a nurse?" Armin smiled. "Not yet." She considered this. "You could be. You're good at staying." The word landed in him like a bell. Staying. Then, like weather turning in a single breath, the past found him. A courier at the clinic's front desk, a thick envelope with his name. Inside, Rivaltech civil suit, defamation. Damages for reputational harm. A hearing date circled in a red pen he didn't own. He looked up from the papers to find Noor watching. She didn't ask what was inside. She only said, "Whatever it is, don't fight it alone." The courthouse smelled like ink and judgment. Elliot Grant arrived, as if walking into his own biography. Perfect suit, perfect smirk, a small constellation of lawyers orbiting him. His eyes cut to Armin, weighing how much was left to take. Inside, the opening volley was theater dressed as law. Rivaltech's counsel painted Armin as a fallen brand lashing out to obscure his failures. A bright montage of his worst headlines glowed on the screen. Billionaire falls, CEO under inquiry. Clinic photo staged? They tried to place him on the wrong side of his own story and asked the court to sign. Armin's attorney rose with a voice kept humble and clean. He didn't argue greatness. He argued process. The forensic verification of the drive. The SEC's pending charges against Rivaltech. The timeline that made the smear transparent. He submitted Victor's statement under seal. A letter written in an exhausted hand. "I hurt the person who taught me to win. I did it for my daughter. He is telling you the truth." The judge read in a silence that gathered everyone's breath. Then, dry and practical, "Mr. Grant, I recommend you consider a settlement before discovery makes a longer meal of your reputation than your PR team can digest." Elliot's smirk failed for half a heartbeat, then returned, brittle. 2 rows back, Noor sat with her hands folded over her violin case like it held a better world inside. The judge called a recess. As the gallery exhaled, Noor's phone buzzed. She glanced down, and the color in her face changed, like a door she couldn't hold shut had swung open. They found a quiet bench near a window, where the rain had thinned to a drizzle that didn't know who to be without thunder. Blended dialogue with narration. Armin touched her sleeve. "What is it?" Noor steadied her breath. "An email from the conservatory in Vienna. I auditioned last year, late nights between clinic shifts." A wry, bright smile. "A friend recorded me in the stairwell. I sent it, then forgot I was allowed to hope." His eyes softened. "And they want me," she said. "A full fellowship, 6 months, master classes, and a tour. I'd leave in 3 weeks." Silence, not shocked, reverent. He looked at her the way a man looks at a door opening to the life someone was meant to live. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know if I could say yes," she answered. "The clinic needs me. My mother's better, but not by much. And," she lifted her gaze, "I didn't know if you'd think I was running away." He shook his head. "You're not running. You're arriving." It was the easiest truth he'd ever spoken. Then a harder one. "I want you to go." Her eyes shone, grateful and afraid. "What if we lose each other?" He took her hand. "If what we're building is real, It survives distance. It won't survive a cage. She blinked, tears fine as rain. You sound like someone I would follow anywhere. He smiled, a smile with nothing left to sell. I'm trying to become someone worth following. She nodded, touched his cheek, then hesitated. There's something else. He waited. She unfolded a different letter, creased and older. Years ago, your real estate fund raised rents on my mother's block, a subsidiary. They didn't renew our lease. We left the music store my father built with his hands. The words landed like stones. I didn't know, Armin whispered. I know, Noor said. But sometimes not knowing hurts almost as much. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain scale or blind spots. He said the sentence that separates apology from strategy. I'm sorry, and I will undo what I can. Mini cliffhanger beat. A bailiff called them back. Settlement talks had moved fast. The next choice would shape his future, and maybe hers. In a small conference room, reality met performance. Elliot's team laid out a predictable menu. Non-disparagement, no admission of wrongdoing, and a generous sum that would rewrite headlines by Monday. Armand read the draft. It felt like being asked to swallow the person he used to be. He slid the papers back. One condition, he said, steady, a 5-year community clinic grant administered by an independent board, public audits. You don't get to buy silence, you fund what you broke. A lawyer laughed so softly it tried to pass for a cough. Elliot's jaw pulsed. You're in no position to make demands. Armand looked at the glass wall, his reflection smaller than the man he'd been, and somehow larger. I already did. He nodded toward Noor outside, visible through the blur of people. We build things now, or we stop pretending we're men. The judge stepped in without ceremony, as if she'd been listening all along. Mr. Grant, the condition is appropriate. Decline, and I suspect our next months together will be very educational for your board. A beat, paper, pen, reluctant ink. Elliot signed. An ending. Just a line crossed on a map with few roads left. Armand signed next, his signature lighter than any he'd written. They stepped into a light that looked almost like forgiveness. Noor came to him, eyes bright with a joy that held sorrow and didn't collapse. You didn't take their money, she said. I took their responsibility, he answered. It spends better. Mini cliffhanger beat. Her phone chimed. An itinerary. 3 weeks, then a long flight. The countdown had begun. They let the next days be small and miraculous. He walked her to the clinic every morning, stayed through the noon rush, watched her teach a boy to coax a clean note from a stubborn string. She showed him her favorite corner of the city, a narrow bridge where wind made the river speak. He showed her his least favorite memory, a luxury lobby he'd designed to impress a person he never became. On their last evening before departure, Noor brought her violin to his apartment. They ate simple food from chipped bowls. Afterward, she tuned beneath the yellow light that made the room gentler than the world. She played a melody he both recognized and didn't, fragments of what they'd survived, stitched to something that felt like home. He sat on the floor, back against the couch, eyes closed. The music wasn't performance. It was a promise. When it faded, he whispered, How do I keep this with me? By the way you spend tomorrow, Noor said, and the day after. Come back to me, he asked, no armor left. If the music lets me, she smiled, and if you keep learning to listen. She stowed the bow and slid a small envelope onto his table. For when it's hard. Inside, a photo of the clinic wall they'd rebuilt, the drawings rehung, and the hand-painted sign almost straight. Draw what you're afraid of, then draw what helps. They stood by the door, reluctant to loosen the moment. Tomorrow had a plane in it. At the window, morning made planes look like patient birds. Noor leaned her head on his shoulder. I didn't pack enough courage, she said, smiling through it. You'll borrow some from me, he answered. And I'll borrow your faith. They laughed quietly, the way people do when they trust the next breath more than the next plan. When her group was called, the world narrowed to details: the strap of her case, the reflection of their two faces in the glass, the tiny, brave nod they shared. She kissed him, brief, steady, true. "Promise you'll play for yourself, too," he murmured. "Promise you'll build something that doesn't need a king to stand," she replied. She walked toward the gate, turned once, lifted her hand. He lifted his. It wasn't dramatic. It was human. The concourse swallowed her and then gave one last image, her silhouette pausing at the threshold, then gone, like good weather that knows how to return. He stood there until the glass fogged where his breath met it, then wiped a circle clear as if to remind himself. See the world you're in, not the one you used to buy. The room where it ends and begins. Armin hadn't set foot inside his old tower in months. The elevator hummed, like a memory, trying to speak. He walked the same hallways where he'd once been untouchable, where silence bowed to his footfall. Now, the glass walls reflected a different man, someone who had learned how to lose gracefully. The anonymous text had been right. One of his old subsidiaries, the same arm that once raised rents on Noor Street, had quietly bought another block for redevelopment. Families were already being pushed out. He met the new project manager, a younger version of himself, confident, ambitious, blind. "You can't cancel progress," the man argued. Armin looked over the skyline. "Progress isn't breaking what's still healing," he said quietly. He signed the order himself, dissolving the project, paying severance, returning the deeds to the community council. For the first time, ink on his signature didn't mean ownership. It meant closure. He left at dusk, the city glowing gold against the glass. For once, it didn't look like it belonged to him. As he walked away, his phone buzzed with a message from Vienna. Noor had collapsed on stage. He didn't think. He moved. He booked the next flight out of Karachi before dawn, carrying only his passport, his phone, and a photograph. The clinic wall with the words, "Draw what you're afraid of, then draw what helps." The plane was quiet, the kind of quiet that lives between prayer and fear. Clouds unfolded outside like the pages of an unfinished story. Every blink brought her face back, bow trembling midair, eyes closing, the sound fading too soon. He landed to cold air and hospital light. Corridors smelled of antiseptic and violin rosin. A nurse recognized his name and led him down a narrow hall. "She's stable," she said. "Exhaustion, dehydration. Too much touring, not enough rest." He stepped into the room. Noor lay against white pillows, a monitor keeping patient time. Her bow hand twitched in sleep as if still conducting dreams. He sat beside her, fingers tracing the chair arm like a rosary. "Even when I left the sky behind," he whispered, "I never stopped looking for you in it." Her eyes fluttered open, just enough for one word: stay. And he did. Days passed quietly. Noor recovered, her laughter returning like color in an old photograph. They took slow walks through cobbled streets near the conservatory, where students practiced arpeggios that drifted into evening air. One afternoon, they sat by a tall window overlooking the river. She tuned her violin, then handed it to him. "Your turn," she said. He laughed. "I don't play. That's why I'm asking." She guided his hand to the bow, her hand over his. The sound that came out was broken, scratchy, human, beautiful. They laughed until the laughter faded to a soft hush. He realized something simple. Love isn't the grand performance, it's the tuning in between. Two people learning to share a room without needing to own the air. Noor turned to him. "You kept your promise." He smiled. "You came back to me." She shook her head gently. "No, you met me, finally." They stood by the window as the sun fell across the water, gilding them both in the same light. No hierarchy, no savior, no king, no muse. Just two people who had survived themselves long enough to understand what love truly costs. He took her hand and whispered, "Let's go home." Months later, the clinic reopened, larger, brighter, alive. The community council hung a new sign above the door, hand-painted by the children, the Hail Elahi Foundation. Armand didn't speak at the ceremony, nor did. Her words were simple. This place isn't built on money. It's built on what's left after pride. When she finished, she found him at the back, smiling, quiet, unassuming, free. They spent the evening with the children, rehanging the old drawings. A child tugged his sleeve. "Are you married?" Noor laughed softly. "Not yet." Armin added, "But we're still learning the music." "The music?" The child frowned. He nodded. "The kind people can hear even when it's quiet." He once built towers to touch the sky. Now he built moments that touched hearts. He once believed money was power. Now he understood love is currency, and time is how you spend it. As the city lights flickered on, Armin Hale realized he was no longer a rich man, just a man who had learned how to stay.